Okay, and I believe we're live. Um, Sorry for the delay. I wanted to test something, see what's going on with. I've about got all these connection issues at least logged down to what I can do versus what I can't do. I'm probably gonna do some testing tonight, and I'll have an after-hours stream up for people who want to hang out. Um, uh, Give me the rundown on these bands, Jeffrey. I know next to nothing about them. Yeah, well, I was gonna actually mention that. So this is VKH Live. This is our VKH Press YouTube channel. Let's see, am I coming through? This is VKH Live. Yep. Okay. And I'm going to be using our combination of, I'm going to be referring to, this is the BP Records official YouTube channel. And then I'm also going to be using VKH Press, which is our home site for this, for reference. So this is, so you can always learn more about J-Rock bands and Visual K bands at vkhpress.com. This is going to be the first band we're going to talk about, but we're going to be talking about BP Records. BP Records is most known for hosting or signing and distributing these three bands, Kiryu, Royz, and CODOMO Dragon. Those are like their big three, and then they've had a fourth band in rotation over the years. They are, the next leg up from Goemon in terms of indie record labels. This is an indie label, believe it or not, even though they have a lot of traction on YouTube and their bands are doing quite well. It's just they're a very successful indie record label so far. And so I'm kind of the opinion that for better or worse, BP Records seems to know what works for their bands now, at least in Japan. In terms of international exposure, they've been on YouTube. They're one of the longest labels on YouTube, or they might have been on YouTube the longest as an indie label. And the bands themselves are kind of driving the views for their own stuff, which is always good, which is always what you want, which is what you would expect of an independent band anyway. They don't actually haven't made a lot of efforts, I don't think, to reach the international market. So I'm not sure what the exact interest is in that for BP bands. I know Royz had put out an introduction video that was subtitled in English through V-Star Promotions channel earlier in the year. So I know Royz has expressed interest in wanting to kind of come overseas. But in terms of the bands in general and the label itself, I'm not so certain they have an interest in that yet. I don't necessarily blame them because they're doing so well in Japan, and they have a very intensive, arguably exhaustive schedule for releases. All their artists are putting out releases, seeming in a fairly predictable schedule at this point, and it's quite regularly. Like, they'll put out singles one right after the other. They'll put out albums kind of staggered one right after the other usually, and live DVDs come out on the same day at this point, I think. The touring cycles are very similar. So they have a formula down. The bands overall, I think, have been resilient enough that I don't think the music is suffering from such an intense release cycle. It's not as suffering as much as I would have expected it to, because it's a pretty frequent release cycle. But as we'll get into each of these bands, I'll kind of talk about that. Maybe if it's an issue for any one particular band, but We're just going to recap the bands, their music, what they put out, and everything like that. There is one thing I wanted to point out, though, that's a little funny. So this is their YouTube channel, right? So you go to their videos. There's a lot of YouTube videos now on BP Records. So they very clearly caught on to the YouTube thing. They have their members doing a bunch of funny stuff. There's not subtitles for them yet. I don't know if there will be, but they're doing very silly things. You know, as you can see, this is the this. I don't know if I want to play that. There's Nintendo footage in it. I don't know if Nintendo still strikes all your shit when you put their stuff in it. I don't know. I say that, but I also have a meme that I want to share with you guys that will appear in that involves Nintendo footage. So we'll just see how that goes. But yeah, so they're putting out like a lot of these YouTuber-esque videos and stuff. So like, check some of these out if you're into any of these bands at all, and let me know what you think in the comments or in chat if you're watching this live and you've seen some of these. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of the Japanese labels have started to catch on that this YouTube thing is a thing. But I only recently realized just the extent that, just how many of those videos, because you can see PVs kind of interspersed in here. But these guys, it used to just be all releases and all PVs and spots and stuff like that. So it looks like especially over the last month or two, last month even, been more and more of that. So let me know what you guys think about that. I'll be curious to see, you know, if that's something fans are interested in, or if it's not relatable enough to them. Japan's moving more and more onto YouTube in general, so I guess it's not too surprising. But I just thought that was a little interesting point to highlight there. So, but yeah, so the reason I'm showing their YouTube and everything is that, like, so this is the main way to like check out their music right now. Outside of buying physical releases through CD Japan, and which, you know, we try to link to those as often as they're available on our website when we put out articles on these artists. But you know, for some people, you know, that want to see it on streaming services, unfortunately, they're not all really there yet. The one that's most available is Kiryu, but they only have some of their older albums. I mean, they're old at this point, but, you know, they're old but gold, I guess, albums like Shuga Ensen and the one that came after it that is like... do I remember how to pronounce it? Kyoka Sugetsu, which are two solid albums, and they're up on Spotify and Apple Music, but they kind of seem like they're just like tossed up there. I almost and mixed in with other artists named Kiryu, I think. So it would be good. It would be great to see with, you know, Goemon records, which we just covered in our last stream. You know, I highlighted that they've got all their artists up on iTunes and Apple Music, very dedicated, intentional push to get them all up there and figured out and configured. So those artists are going to get a lot more pull now than, you know, those from other records. Like, these are big bands, you know. Kiryu has pulled in millions of views, especially for BP Records. So that's money on the table, views on the table for them to come and take, and exposure that they're not getting. So I would definitely like to see, like, the, you know, actual like full releases up there, because they, you know, Goemon is a competitor technically to BPR. You know, they are very clearly going for a similar market in the indie VK scene, and are kind of doing a lot of you know. Just this is just an outsider's observation, obviously, but they seem to just be taking steps with the intention of cutting in on that market, or you know, and I'm sure there'll be other labels that follow that do the same thing. But these bands sell themselves if you just get them out up on their on the platform to do it, and their YouTube channel is a big evidence of that. You know, like if I go to most popular, yeah, like Kiryu's got 2 million views. Royz has got one with 1.5. Kiryu with 1.5. Royz, Kiryu, and Komodo all doing their family party thing. 1.5. Royz, Kiryu. Log, who is no longer around. I'm surprised that jumped way up. I actually didn't notice that. Kiryu. You know, so they're breaking 7 figures. So I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there. Because I know, like, let me check the chat again. But let's see. Yeah, like Gula said, you know, give me the rundown on these bands. I know next to nothing about them. Gula does know a lot about Poidol, for example, and she knows a lot more about the, you know, the Komodo dragon of Goemon than the actual Komodo dragon. I would say most likely, and it's, you know, and it's the same reason that I know more about Poidol than I do about Komodo Dragon, which is that their music is much more available outside of their PVs. So, or at least it is now for me. So, yeah, get that up there, fam. Get that up there, fam. But anyways, let's talk about. Okay, so. Log, speaking of, you know, fourth band, fourth tier band, I don't know how you would call it for these bands, but like BP's had their big 3 for a while now, but they've been pushing for a while, trying to kind of add in a 4th band. So they had Log, that didn't. And then they ended up disbanding. Then they had Lawn Boy, who ended up disbanding. But Lawn Boy technically came back, and so their current form that they're in is called 0 Hertz. They made their debut this year. It is all ex Lawn Boy and members, and I think maybe also Danga No Limit members from what we're reporting here. I didn't write this article. I would have to go back and double check. I just know specifically it's all the old members of Lawn Boy. You know, this was the reincarnation of it. So, so they made their debut this year. They had a full-length album that came out in May called Ray Seisen, and then they had a single called Red Rum that came out. In terms of like how it sounds, at least going off of their PVs, and I'm just gonna give a bird's eye view of the PVs and then kind of what I know probably for a lot of these, except for Kiryu, because I have been following Kiryu fairly closely. Just because like that's what's more broadly available, right? So if you want to hear more about these bands in the future, like their albums and singles and releases and things like that, you know, I can go and obtain them, I suppose, and you know, reach out and get a copy or two. But The majority of these have been single releases and or otherwise not something I'm wholly personally interested in myself beyond what PVs I find and I like. So Lawn Boy was kind of like their stuff to me. My initial reaction was just like, nah, to a certain degree because it was just kind of like. So I was talking about it with Poidal this on the last stream with Goemon, and then I talked about it at length on the Poidal Power Hour we did last night, the problem with trying to do Kira K at this point is that unless you have like a really strong personality or like that you can really harness and like really sell yourself through that, which bands like Poidal and Royz do, you're going to really just kind of sound like everybody else and look like everybody else. So that was kind of a problem with Lawn Boy. When they came back, but they've come back as Hertz, and they've put out they've put out a couple PVs. They had some music out there, and now that I think about it, I have actually heard a couple of tracks off of their full album, and so I would say it's a bit more unique. It's a bit more distinct. I think it's more in the right direction. It's it's a little bit heavier, I suppose. When you get to the chorus, a lot of these Kira bands, it all kind of comes back to like that same a fairly light sound, but Hertz kind of has a bit more edge, and I think that's the right way to go. I think they just need a few more releases to kind of see where their sound goes, and to really hook someone like me in personally, that's kind of really like I will skim the top of Kira K so I get the cream of the crop, and everything else I'm passing on personally at this point, because it is such a saturated market that I just don't need to hear the same song 18,000 times. So sorry. That's the way it is, but from what I'd heard from them, I'm keeping one eye on them. I'm not sold yet, but I'm keeping an eye on them. I think they're there's more potential there than there was for like past bands like Lawn Boy or Log, for example. So let me know what you think about them, if you've been following them at all. Yeah. So we'll see how they go. I believe they might have an album coming out in 2019. But I have to double check that, and I'll have to double check that and see. But I'm sure all the BP bands will have a release of some sort out in 2019, because they always do. They release very frequently. Let's see. So next up, I wanted to talk about Kodomo Dragon. So they are releasing they have released a lot this year. I'm just using this because I love this image of them. But they have released, let's see, they've released 3 singles, and it's been 3 very interesting singles. So they had What This Is From, which is No Kawasu. And this was very interesting because Kodomo Dragon has had periods of time in the past where they've kind of like ventured into other sounds and styles. I mean, they are kind of constantly doing that, but they do have a core sound of like this quirky hard rock kind of sound. That they've been like developing and making more and more interesting. But there was like a period of time where they kind of like went over and started sounding, you know, a little bit like something I would expect to hear from a band like Arlequin on Goemon Records, for example. There was like a period of time a couple years back where it was like that. And then there were a few times where they kind of started to seem, well, actually it wasn't them that started to seem, yeah, they started to seem a little, yeah, that was a weird period of time that came where it was like there were a few points where they kind of seemed like a little bit more like Royz, and then there were a few points where Royz started to sound a little bit more like CODOMO Dragon. I think that was prior to Royz's album coming out. That was weird. Yeah, that was weird. Like they'll be like all over the place, but at the end they'll always come back to like their core sound, and it gets funkier and fresher and weirder. But this one actually reminded me of Kiryu. Like they went in and they you know, this looks very Oshare, but it's actually a really hard song, really, you know, hard sound, and it's got the rapid drumming that Kiryu's kind of known for. The vocalist, I think, has feathers in his hair and his PV. Is that the song I'm thinking of? Is that what this is? Do I have the right song for this, or am I thinking of a different song? Am I doing it Le Epic Fail? Yes, I'm doing Le Epic Fail. That was from last year is what I'm talking about. So, yeah, okay. So, whoops. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so the one I was talking about was another case where it was like they were borrowing from Kiryu, and that was from last year, I think. So, but thankfully I do remember this PV as well. I was going to say I thought it was a little different, but, this PV is No Kawasu. This is the one with the rainbow everything and like donuts and candy and everything like that, right? Yeah, it is. A little research window over here, figuring it out. Yeah. Anyway, it's the same point overall, regardless, which is that these guys, they like to bounce around and pull in a lot of different influences from a lot of different places, including fellow artists or, you know, whatever it seems like it's whatever they think it's kind of hype at the time is how I would put it. So this year, then if No Kawasu is that single, and then along with the other two singles. So this year for them was really like a year of them coming back with like a core CODOMO Dragon sound that's like really fresh and modern and evolved. So man, I must have just never learned the name of this song then, because I have this in my favorites, the No Kawasu and the PV. It's got like that bouncing chorus with like the guitar riffs and stuff. Yeah, so this No Kawasu song was nuts to a certain degree, but it was very quirky. CODOMO was very catchy, and 1 minute like a banger, and the next minute like you're da 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 da, like in the chorus. That was so that was a solid release. That came out in March. I remember. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, Chad. I remember. I'm more zoned in on the next two singles because I know there's been a lot of talk about them, and those were the most interesting ones. But yeah, we don't want to forget about that one. That one was good. That one was really good. That one might be my favorite. So, but all three of CODOMO Dragon singles have been really interesting. So the next single that they talked about that we're going to talk about that they put out is called Toge, and that came out in July. Now that one is another banger. That was these guys were leaning into like the heavier stuff, you know, a little bit more, I guess here. But yeah, that had another, like, you know, it had a heavy section with a catchy, quirky hook in it. I would just say for that, it is more of the same thing I just described. It's quite catchy and engaging and enjoyable. But yeah, no complaints from me on either of those two singles. I think it's the right direction. I think you know, when they come back to their core sound is very experimental and quirky and, you know, fun to begin with. So when they kind of have these little epiphanies that they have where they'll try different things for, you know, a slew of singles, and then you know, and then they'll release a slew of singles that are just, that are, you know, then they'll return back to their core form with the new things they've kind of figured out. CODOMO Dragon's really good about iterating on this really quickly. So the last single that they put out was called So-So, and that one was getting a lot of talk, a lot of attention, a lot of praise. That is because that one is actually quite different for them. But it's like really good different, because it's different from like a lot of other VK bands as well. It almost brings back, it's like a melodic, passionate, emotional song. You know, this is the music video for it. And they're very, very, they're almost like invoking vibes of like old passionate like emo tracks, I want to say, like the mainstream emo from back in the day. It was very nostalgic. I got like huge vibes of nostalgia listening to it. Like, you know, I'm not talking like the really like sad kind of emo. I'm talking about like it's like the hopeful, I guess, like Salvesen, stuff like that. Like, you know, back in the day when everyone was listening to like that one song they had out. But like it was bringing back vibes of that for me. Like, it's very impassioned and it's sad, but it's also like emotional and hopeful, I suppose. So CODOMO Dragon in general is just in a really is in a wild place right now, where they have like the more these energetic tracks like figured out, and then, you know, like I wouldn't have expected a track like So-So from them, and I wouldn't have expected it to work out so well. So there's a lot of people that are really keeping a hard eye on CODOMO Dragon, just to be sure, or just to be safe, just to make sure they don't miss what's coming next, because they've kind of been killing it with these last couple of singles. So they're still in the spotlight a little bit from their contemporaries, I think. So yeah, let's see what chat's doing. Yeah, BPR has been busy, says Lauren. They had one video where Mahiro from Kiryu was just signing posters for like 10 minutes. That was odd. Everything's content in the internet age. I guess they finally found out. I guess they finally learned that rule. I guess, are we going to have a bunch of VK YouTuber boys now? We have Yoshikis trying to do live concerts. We have Toshi unboxing stuff, you know. This will be an interesting year. 2019, I feel like. If they could just release, if they could even just translate some of their fun videos, I would love it. Yeah, it would be amusing to get more context. Kodomo's been on fire. Toge was fire. Last single was a great ballad. Yeah, so I agree. They definitely release a lot of. They've always been, you know, done this, like just gone in these spurts where it's just like a slew of singles that's just like all heat. Like, you know, they're like bangers, but they're like weird and catchy and quirky as well, and it draws in a lot of different types of people. They use a lot of irregular rhythms, or like uncommon rhythms, or they used to, at least. They still do, I think, to a degree. And they actually, like in their heyday, they got big off of that. Which back in the day, it was more like they were getting big in spite of that, because, like, you know, I mean, bands like Royz were like taking off really hard, you know, when CODOMO Dragon was first starting. And but they found a market with like these quirkily written and performed PVs because the choruses would be like crack in terms of like how hyper catchy they were. But then the rest of the song would be like wild and all over the place. And, I think anyone who was around to check out like their the PVs from like their first singles, or their earlier singles and stuff like that will kind of know what I mean. And if you go to BP Records, you can find those PVs as well. But it's nice to see how they've matured and just kind of stuck to that, not like turned into any other kind of band. Like they've just like stuck to that same kind of quirky, zany kind of attitude in making music and their visuals and stuff. It's kept things fresh, and I was quite impressed. So yeah. Let's see. Who's next? Royz is next. Okay, so Royz has put out. Let me pull up my notes for Royz. So Royz this year. Okay, so they put out their. So they put out their album "World Is Mine." In March is where we can start with them. I suppose. This is from the single that came out in June afterwards, This Look, which is called Doll. We'll get to that in a second, but just a quick note on World Is Mine, I suppose. It didn't really seem to be my thing as an album. It's just a little too Kira K for me, and I know Royz is like the king of Kira K, so that's kind of equivalent to me saying Royz isn't my thing, which they may not be anymore, but Royz has actually had a really cool history of bringing a lot of different elements into their style and sound. I think their 2014 album Core was brilliant in how they were able to bring in heavy music but in the more palatable context of this Kira K style that they kind of have, and the result was a bunch of really catchy and energetic and fire tracks. It actually supercharged like the main Kira sound that they had at the time, I think, and made them a substantially better band as a result of that. I had zero interest in Royz actually prior to the singles and then the album that came from those singles, which was Core, and I've been very interested in following them ever since then. Even when they make lighter stuff, even when they make whatever stuff, I just think their sound from that point on has gotten much better as a result of trying that. And they did that for they did that a little bit for their album in Siva, but it was a bit more Siva, which came out in 2016. But I felt like that one was a bit more, I guess, disorganized in nature, but definitely had interesting tracks on there. That was like The Beginning, Emotions, R.I.P. and Supernova were all singles that were on there. So it was decent, but it was fairly disorganized from what I remember listening. So World Is Mine is coming from a bunch of singles that I have had mixed feelings about, and as a result, I've kind of just given this album a pass for now. Like, I might come back to it later, but they hadn't really sold me with their singles like they had with the last two albums. So this has got stuff like Antithesis and Raven and Anthem on here, and then I believe the PV track was Synchronicity. And Antithesis, I thought, was a great song. I thought that was a fresh kind of a take on the kind of music that they use or that they make normally. That's probably one of their better songs, actually. Raven and Anthem were like them trying to move back a little bit more towards the hard rock thing, but it doesn't seem to quite be doing it for me as much. It doesn't seem as organic. Something seemed a little off, I suppose. I would actually say Anthem was more saved by like the Kira Kira chorus that they had in it than like as opposed to like made better by the hard rock aspect of it. So I think there's something a little off in terms of like their ability to balance that these days, unfortunately. Synchronicity was fine. It was just kind of more of the same, you know. I guess Kira Kira stuff. So and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you're into. Like if you like that sound and then you can eat that up all day. Like that's me with like you know there's certain types of stuff that's me all day. Like the electronic core type visual kei stuff. I'll do that all day every day. But in terms of like you know gaining interest from anybody else beyond that. I'll have to see. I've kind of been on the fence about like would I even want to, you know, check out the album, sit through that. Like I don't know. So we'll see. But I keep an eye on their releases and their PVs for this reason, because they do make good songs. You know, it's just sometimes they're not my thing, or they're just not interesting enough. Now, Doll was like another example of them trying experimentation, and it's a catchy song. It's interesting. It's good. It's a decent song. It's like a jazz rock song, and so this is them trying to be experimental again, which I appreciate. It's just I feel like they need to be, you know, if they're gonna actually do it, you know, I guess it needs to happen more often, because I guess these last few singles where they've been like, let's try and go a little harder, let's try and bring this in, it hasn't meshed quite as well as it used to. So when they would try things, so but Doll, I want to so Doll uses these trumpets that I made an observation about, and then somebody in our Discord, Delta, sent me something very special that she made. Shout out to Delta for this, and also shout out to Delta for making the thumbnails for these streams, for this stream and the Goemon Records stream. But I'm going to play this, and hopefully it comes through. So this is something she sent me. If you've heard Doll, listen to Doll and then like listen to this, and you'll understand that where the similarity in the sound is coming from. If you feel like it sounds similar, this might be why. To something, this might be why. Yeah, so that was Donkey Kong music. That's all I could remember. That's all that I could think of when I was hearing that single. So I apologize to any Royz fans watching. That single has been ruined by my childhood, where I was playing Donkey Kong Country. Oh goodness. But kidding aside, it was a decent single, decent experimentation. And now most recently they put out this song Symphonia, which I don't have release Symphonia, which I don't have any interest in personally. Just I've listened to the PV and the song. It's a really pretty nice song, you know, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I know we have some Poidal fans that watch this show. So I don't know. You guys take a look at maybe I can like skim through some of this and see Oh, did I just pick oldest? See if there's, see what the deal is. See if there's some similarities. Where's some phone? So this actually only came out like a few weeks after Aqua Blue by Poidol came out, but I'm seeing a lot of blues. I'm seeing a lot of aquas. I'm seeing a lot of water. I don't know. So we have a competition to see who can be the most sparkly underwater band, apparently. It's between Royz and Poidol. So let the games begin, I suppose. Let me see what chat says. I hate you for making me hear that again. Lauren says I actually like the different sound of Anthem. I mean, it did grow on me. In the beginning, I was like, no, none at all. I don't know how I feel about this. Maybe it's just if they like experiment with something, maybe they should pick something for like a couple of singles and try it. Because I guess that's what worked with Royz with their core, their singles leading into core, was they kind of were just like, no, we'll just stick with it generally, like we're gonna do the harder thing in general. Let me bring up a couple clips of Poidol Aqua Blue. It's more the look than anything, I think, that's similar. Well, we'll see. Yeah, so this came out a few weeks prior, I think. So I don't actually know. Yeah. There's some. If you look at the single covers, it's for this, it's like hella underwater, hella sparkly, hella aqua blue. So it's yeah. So we have two people. They're too close in release date for either one to have copied each other. I just find it amusing that we now have like a new underwater concept, and we have, it's fairly new, like and we have two of the more interesting Kira K bands are now already in direct competition over it. see who can pull off the more fire underwater show, I guess. Well, I guess it wouldn't be a fire show if it's underwater, I suppose. Yeah. So Royz, yeah, we'll see about. I always have confidence in them as a really solid Kira K band. They always release something that I enjoy. So, but and now we'll close off with Kiryu. So if you want like a full on dissection of Kiryu, you can check out. Especially with in the context of their recent releases, if you haven't already, you can check out our Kiryu stream we did last night. I dove into my thoughts on their album, their latest album, Tensho Rene. I thought it was great. I thought it was, I guess what I'll talk about, for this year is, or for this stream, in terms of the stuff they put out this year. They just put out this year, they put out the Harushigure and the Muku single leading up into the Tensho Rene full album. So I think this year, if you were to look at 2018, it was them shoring up their sound into its latest form, which you can really experience in Tensho Rene, which is and I thought for a while, like coming into the end of 2017, that they might be slipping, that they might have been slipping, and that they might have run out of ideas, because they do release albums really fast, and like a ton of singles. All the Goemon bands do, and Kiryu has just achieved like some massive success and both commercially, but they've also pulled off some like musical combinations that I've never heard before. Both like in terms of like the combining of like the tradition, the way they combine like the rock instruments with the traditional Japanese instruments, and also just in the way they experiment with different song structures and musical instrumentation and composition. They really take you on a trip, like a mind-melting trip with their albums. Their albums are really, really enjoyable to listen to. It's like you're really going on like some crazy adventure every time. Especially these last 3 to 4 albums have been like just they've been crushing it. Every album they've been crushing it. You know, as far as I'm concerned, they pulled it off. They've crushed it again with Tensho Rene. It's less of a wild, crazy crazy explosion of sounds that the last one was, or like a fresh expansion into a bunch of other maybe more mainstream friendly sounds like the one before that. But this is almost like them like taking everything they've done over the last several albums and restructuring it into like a more mature format. You get a lot of different song styles on here that use a lot of similar Kiryu themes or Kiryu sounds, or that sounds like a Kiryu song. But listening to it as an album, you know, you realize it feels like it's a more mature band that is now making these songs. And like they seem to be like commanding all of these wild different sounds that they have in like a more authoritative way to create more like denser, richer songs in a like or tracks with like a more with like more varied song structures, I guess. So it feels less like Mad Science Experiment now and more like wild mystical tale, and more like confident musicians pushing a thoroughly unique sound of their own, and laying it out solidly in like a mature album, in a really mature way. So I would say, like, after listening to the album as of the end of 2018, Kiryu is doing great. I would encourage those of you who weren't necessarily completely wowed by the PV songs, like I wasn't. There's certain PV tracks that they'd had for their last album that blew me away. The PV tracks this time around, they either didn't land with me the first time or they just felt too similar. I would say give it a listen in the context of the full album, because some of these songs I listened to, I looked back, I decided, I was like, you know what, that was a good song. Let's hear that again. I came back and realized that they had put them out as singles, as PVs in the past, and this year, and I was like, I don't know why that didn't land with me the first time, but in the context of the album, they made it work really well. So. Yeah, I don't know if maybe it's just the PVs themselves are just a little off-putting currently. I know Kiryu always does vicious and or just really crazy, stunning PVs. I think it's like the last couple ones may have just been a little too distracting potentially. It could have been that, which is really ironic because it's like they've had all kinds of bloody, gory songs and PVs in the past that I don't think have distracted too much from the music. I suppose it has to a certain extent. Their shock, the shock value of a lot of their PVs, because I do remember with Shuka Ensign just being mortified watching the PV. And then I later came back and watch and listen to the song itself, when I had the album, and I was like, oh wait, hold on, wait a minute, this is a really badass like metal instrumentation in the bridge. I don't remember this at all. I was too busy like like staring agape at the gore fest in front of me, as like, so I guess it kind of depends. Some of the PVs where they do like the scary gory thing, it works amazingly and it sells you the song even harder. Like for their 2014 album Kyoka Sugetsu, one of the singles that came out prior to that was on it, it's called Akaimi Hajiketa, and they nailed the song PV combination for that. And it's a scary PV, it's kind of bloody, but it's like the visuals and then like the panic in that song, like they all scale together like really well. So I guess it kind of depends on the vibe. For the lighter stuff, like I think Geka, how do you say that? Geka Bijin. That was that single's on Tensho Rene, and I don't think there was any problem with that PV. It was just a kaleidoscope of like, colors like pink and everything. I don't think there was anything distracting about that. But anyway, my point is that like go listen to this album in full. It is an album I would recommend you just listen all the way through. It is they're really living up to the reputation that they have in terms of putting out albums that are just a joy to listen to. So I was wrong for doubting you, Kiryu. You had me nervous for a little while, but you came out on top. So yeah. I think the moral of the story here is that like I think the best way to review like BP bands, I think, and bands that are on like scheduled releases like this, is to like wait till the full album comes out. And this isn't a review, obviously, but we do write reviews, and we do. I guess we give our impressions on stream here, but when it comes to reviewing and giving like a authoritative thought, it's kind of hard to pick a point with these bands, and I think it's still safe to say it's the albums, because the albums will feature a bunch of singles that have come out prior. And then you can also evaluate like the band's ability to incorporate these singles into their album. So what the effort they've done with those singles is going to reflect in the album. And what I mean by that is it's like if they've done a really good job of growing as a band and very cohesively, and they're smart about the singles that they pick to include, then when you listen to the album, it should flow right through the non-single tracks. From non-single tracks to single tracks, it should flow fine as an album, which is like what Kiryu does. It has been pretty good about over the course of their career. If it doesn't, and it's like kind of like I feel like they're just thrown in there, then sometimes that's due to to a band like throwing out they want a bunch of hits, and then it comes time to write the album, and maybe not enough thought goes into it, and so it just kind of feels like they're just kind of thrown in there. And so I think as they every time they come through an album, it's like that's the cycle still, and that's like the best point to really like I think kind of get a strong sense of what they're doing, because Kiryu really threw me for a loop there for a minute. Like I wasn't sure which way they were going when they were putting stuff out, but when I heard it all in the context of the album, I was like, oh wow, this actually sounds like really like legit. Like I had assumed they were running out of ideas because I was hearing them revisit sounds, and then I was like, no, I actually didn't give them enough credit that they were trying to rework it back into a way to present it in a full album as its own, as their own evolved Kiryu 2.0 sound, based on what they've done over the last several albums. So, um, but yeah, so I would say overall, uh, I mean, BP bands are still going quite strong. Uh, yeah, not a lot to say after everything I've said, I don't think. That's about where I feel. They've still got those big three. Those will always be the big three, I feel. Um, Really kind of surprised that at how I'm ending the year with Kodomo Dragon, feeling a lot more confident about Kodomo Dragon than Royz. I think that's a big deal, actually, because I do like their quirky experimentation. Their quirky experimentation and all of that stuff. But compared to Roy's in the last couple years, over the last few years, they weren't anything near as stable of a band that you could count on for music that was like, yes, like that's solid music, or as opposed to, oh, this was a hit, oh, this was a flop, oh, well, they tried this, oh, well, they tried that. Roy's was kind of like on this like steady incline until I guess a year and a half ago, and then Kodomo Dragon was all over the place, and now it's like Kodomo Dragon seems to have stabilized, and Roy's I'm just like, we'll see, I guess, but so let me see what chat says. Uh, Tenshironi was so good. Kiryu is always a mad scientist experiment. Yeah, it is, and even like their B sides on their singles, to be honest, are like, really shockingly good and just wild. I can't tell you how many of their fan favorites, and I'm assuming they're fan favorites because they'll end up being played at live shows, and I'll be like, oh, I thought I was the only. I thought I didn't know everybody was down with this. A lot of their fan favorites end up just being these like insane singles that they B sides that they would put on some of their singles. Um, I think I've seen a few of their PVs, but I can't remember. Yeah, brace yourself, I suppose. One way or another, you're gonna get either an explosion of horror, like traditional Japanese horror, and or you're going to get an explosion of beautiful colors and pseudo meditation music that's like been sped up 5 times. Either one's really engrossing and hypnotic, but I would brace yourself either way when it comes to the PVs. um, Kiryu videos distracting? I can't imagine. What music genre do they play? They're it's like a mixture of, so they're Angurake, I guess, which is what is well, not I guess, but which is like the visual K with the where they dress, very traditional, like with like kimonos and stuff like that, and they heavily reflect that with their music. So they use a lot of like traditional Japanese instruments. They're kind of these days, and just in general, it's either going to be like this light rock that you would attribute to like a band like Kagra for Pioneering, where it's like it's like very pretty and soothing and maybe like just really energetic because they just like doing really energetic stuff, or it's going to be this stuff that they really pioneered, which is like this we've called it like horror rock for the longest time, because it's like this really spooky, ominous and like hard rock, maybe bordering on metal, especially because their guitarists are really talented. They're really like, and they do like a lot of like, you know, they've had songs where they can shred. I'll just put it that way. But and then they mix it with like a bunch of those traditional Japanese music. And it's just, they use it in really interesting effects and interesting ways. They use both sides in interesting ways. Like there's a lot of like heavy distortion on the electric guitars, for example, when they're playing like guitar solos that make it sound almost like you would expect it to be an old Japanese instrument. I don't, or like an old Far East instrument, you know, so. So yeah, that's the easiest way I would describe Royz. But yeah. So yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys tomorrow. What do we have tomorrow? We have. It's not like I wrote this or anything. Yeah, we're doing. I have the links for everything through Saturday all set up, by the way. So tomorrow we're doing Razor, Grimoire, and Umaleap, and then Saturday is going to be our ranking releases marathon. So we're going to be taking in fan votes for ranking from favorite to least favorite the releases of different bands. So if you're new, how this works is we give you an artist like Kizu, we give you a type of release like their songs, and then we give you a survey link that has all of that kind of release for the artist. This one's the most ambitious one. This one's the longest one, but Kizu has a short enough catalog. I wanted to do songs with them, and you can just kind of come in here and you can rank from your favorite to your least favorite, which you think is your favorite, and then you hit submit, and then we reveal the results on the streams. So we're doing, we've got those up. We're doing Kizu with songs, Dimlim with PVs, Dataroma with mini albums, and Duran Gray with full length albums. So yeah, we will see you guys for that. And then also these streams here for Friday. And then I will have the links for the rest of them. I'm going to have some special things, got to finish planning for those. So, but yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch y'all tomorrow. Bye.